So this has been going on for a few years now. The first time I encountered it, I was chopping on a tree with a hatchet on the edge of the woods, and after a while, I got this creepy sense of fear coming over me. I started to look around to see if there was any type of animal or anything. I didn't see anything. Then I decide I've had enough of being creeped out and start to head back to my house. The feeling of being watched has still not gone away. I look back at the tree and I see a humanoid creature prowling low to the ground next to the tree. Its grey skin was tight against its body, sharp claws protruding out of its fingers, empty eyes staring right at me. I promptly go inside. A few months later, I saw it again. It was in the middle of the night. I had gotten up to go to the bathroom. The room is at the end of the hallway, so I have plenty of time to look at the window next to the bathroom door. While looking through it, I saw something staring back, the same empty eyes as before. When it noticed that I saw it, it ran off. The third time I meet it, my friend had come over to stay the night. We're going through a closet in the extra room and found some cool jackets. We decided it would be fun to go around outside wearing them. It was dark out. We were not out there for long before we started hearing things. It was at the edge of the woods, near where I saw it before. What we were hearing were footsteps, like a person walking around, heavy stomping in the brush. So the smart kids we were decide to start making sounds and throwing sticks and stuff at it to try and get a reaction out of it. And we did. First came the smell. Imagine the worst smell you've smelt, and it's worse. We stopped for a minute because the smell was so bad, and then the footsteps stopped. We thought, okay, it left. Nope. We started to hear running towards us. We didn't stick around to find out what it was and ran into the house. The fourth time I encountered it, a couple of my friends came out to stay the night. We were kids and liked to play hide and seek outside, but only when the moon was gone, so it was harder to see. It was mine and a friend's turn to hide, so we hid in this shed type thing off the side of the garage. The front of it was open, and the side towards the woods was half open. I was hiding behind this piece of metal that was leaning against the half-open wall. By this time, the seeker should have been outside trying to find us. He was not. I could see the door where he should have came out of, but he never did. After a while of sitting there, talking to my other friend that had hidden in there too, I hear footsteps outside in the gravel coming from the woods. I ask my friend if they hear it, and they say yes. We get quiet, thinking it was the seeker, but I had never seen him go out of the door. I just think, oh, he went out the front door to trick us. But I was wrong. The smell returned, and the footsteps got closer. It comes up to the wall and leans into the room. I can see its long, deformed foot, its sharp claws instead of toenails. Then I see the seeker come out of the door, and so it does as well. It walks off, not in a hurry. After it goes, I sit there for a while, heart beating at 100 beats a minute, and I ask my friend if they saw it, and they said they heard it. I call to the seeker and ask him to help me out. I did not want to stay out there any longer. So the fifth time I encountered it happened a few months ago now. The same two friends from before had come out for the day to hang out, so we did for the day and had a good time and all. We were chilling at this park area on my property, right next to the woods it resides in. It was pitch black, of course, but the park had lights which we had on. After a while of talking, I needed to go to the bathroom or get something from the house. When I get back, the lights of the park had been turned off. I turn on the flashlight on my phone and head over there. I find friend 1 sitting in the chair where they had been. I ask them where friend 2 went, and they said they didn't know. I tell them to help me find friend 2. We walk around for a while, trying to call him and stuff. Then we hear someone, like walking back and forth in the woods. It's kind of by a road. We all go out to it, thinking it was friend 2, and we slowly go towards it. After a few seconds of walking to it, friend 2 comes over from the opposite direction and says not to go over there. He explains how he's been hearing noises and stuff coming from over there for a while now. While we were talking, we noticed that it was completely still outside. No noises or anything, which was weird. Then we start hearing noises from across the road. We were like, that's messed up. Then decide to cross the fence and go over there. It was the same walking back and forth that I've heard before, like it was trying to get us to follow it. I tell them that I think that, and to stay back. We decided to throw stuff and make noises at it to make it go away, but it never did. We waited there till their parents came to get them, and after they did, I ran as fast as I could back to my house. I don't normally encourage this, and I've always been a firm ignorance is bliss kind of guy. I've seen ghosts before and spirits, and it never really bothered me, because I would just shut it out and carry on with my day. However, there is one encounter that I have never been able to forget, and that still freaks me the hell out to this day. I live in the UK, and used to live in a nice area just outside of a big city. It was sort of in the countryside, but not. There was always this one part of the woods that just gave me weird vibes. Unexplainable, and the feeling that you shouldn't be there. One 420, me and a few friends thought it would be a good idea to go to the spot, as we referred to it, and set up a tent and have a good time. It probably got around to 1 AM, and being tired and stoned, I decided to just walk home since I lived 10 minutes away. I remember I left by myself and started on the path home. The area where we had set up was wooded, a lot of high bushes, and a good mile away from any house. It's also near an army firing range. I don't know if this is important. I remember walking down the path, flashlight on my phone shining the way, when I felt what I can only describe as pure fear. It felt like my whole body was telling me I had to leave this area as fast as I could, or else I was going to end up dead. Now, I know this could have been me being paranoid, but when I used to smoke, I never ever experienced anything like this. Anyway, I started running as fast as I could, and I could hear what sounded like galloping running behind me. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it was getting closer to me and I was in danger. I managed to get to the clearing, which was about 100 meters near the main road. As soon as I got there, I quickly turned around to see what was chasing me, and I remember seeing this tall, pale, bony creature standing still at the top of the clearing, watching me. It must have been 8 feet tall, and had these massive eyes that reflected the light. I never told anyone what I saw, because I knew no one would believe me. And every time I walked past the clearing, I felt I was being watched. However, a few years later, my friend and I were discussing paranormal events. I told him what had happened, and we decided to go there. It was during the day and light. We got to the area and ventured in deeper. Only complaining we got a weird vibe, but nothing to be concerned about. However, As we got deeper, we came across what can only be described as a tunnel of trees that led to a round clearing with a single tree growing in the middle. Nothing else. All other vegetation was dead. As we started to walk through the tunnel, what could only be described as a face appeared through the vegetation staring at us. We both got a good look at it, and we saw a long sunken face with large jet black eyes staring at us with slits for a nose. We both bolted and got the hell out of there. To this day, we haven't spoken about it, and I just wanted to know what the hell it was. Somehow, I know it was watching and observing. It was definitely predatory, and it is a thing of pure evil. I can feel it. My experiences from late 2006, just before winter break of my freshman year of college. I went to a small college in rural western Pennsylvania, and the freshman parking lot was on the edge of campus, up against some state game lands. We'd go out there a couple of nights a week to smoke, and that night, we went to our usual spot in the clearing with a fallen log to sit on, just past what you could see from the parking lot, though we could see the lights from the lot through the trees behind us. Now, I'm sure you're already thinking, it's probably just the smoke, but we were veteran smokers, had just started smoking that night, and had been smoking out of the same bag previous nights without any weird things happening. We packed a bowl and had maybe one hit each as we sat there, talking quietly. It was winter, and this night was particularly cold, like in the teens, Fahrenheit, but very still, no wind, almost nothing making sound out in the woods where we were. I took my first hit and handed the bowl and lighter back to my friend, then looked up to exhale. That's when I saw it through the smoke. A humanoid face in the trees on the other side of the clearing, opposite the parking lot. It was just above a branch that it had wrapped its hand around. I think it had 3 fingers with a very long, narrow thumb that stuck out several inches past its other fingers, each tipped with a pointed nail. As the smoke cleared, I got a better look at its face. Very pale, almost greyish skin, bald, no eyebrows, no other hair of any kind, no ears that I could see, big eyes relative to its head that were very dark in colour, catching just a little bit of light from the lights of the parking lot behind us, which made them seem kind of reflective. I didn't get a great look at the nose or mouth, as I was fixated on the eyes, but from what I recall, they seemed small relative to its head compared to a human. I tapped my friend's knee and quickly glanced over at him to see if he saw it as well, and he was staring at it too, so it's something we both saw independently. I looked back at it just as it released its hand from the branch, revealing very long, thin fingers to match the thumb, and then it moved backwards out of our sight without making a sound, even though there were dry leaves all over the ground. I'd guess only about 5 seconds actually passed during this span, but it felt much longer, and there was this odd calm over the whole situation. As soon as it was out of sight, however, my friend and I both felt intense fear, and we ran back to the parking lot. It was in such a panic that he didn't realize he had stuffed the still smoking bowl into his coat pocket and dropped the lighter. We ran to the opposite side of the lot from the woods, where there was a road, some cars passing, and some other students walking around, where we finally felt safe. There was an initial, "Oh my god, did you see that? What was that?" kind of conversation before we calmed down and talked about the details of what we saw, which matched up perfectly. The only thing he noticed that I didn't was that he said he didn't think it even had a mouth. We thought maybe it was a classic grey alien or something, but knew no one would believe us and didn't tell anyone else. The next day, we went back to the spot in the woods and found our lighter standing up right on the log we were sitting on. The odds of it falling and landing like that are very, very low, adding another creepy factor. Did this thing find it and put it there? We also walked over to the tree where we saw it and found the branch it was grasping. It was a good 10 to 12 feet above the ground. We couldn't even reach it by jumping, and there was nothing around. No stumps, no rocks, no lower branches that it could have been standing on, so it had to be tall to appear there. Weirdly, the leaves on the ground had been disturbed all around the area beneath the tree. Not like just tracks or something, but it was as if something had intentionally brushed the leaves away and then dug some shallow holes, maybe 4 or 6 of them, about 6 to 8 inches deep and 2 to 3 inches wide. My friend was a biology major who had been an Eagle Scout and now works in a state park, so he knew a good deal about most of the area's wildlife and didn't know anything that would disturb the ground in that fashion. Plenty of animals dig, but they don't sweep away an area, probably 5 by 5 feet, of leaves like that just to dig a couple of holes like that. He couldn't find any other tracks leading away from the area. We never went back there after dark again, and never saw it again either. Anyway, that's my possible encounter with a crawler. Make of it what you will. So let me try to explain the scene first. It's 2011, and I had just graduated high school. It was the age of razor flip phones, and girls drenched in cucumber melon body spray. My boyfriend at the time and I decided that we would have me sneak out of my second-story bedroom and have a little young dumb fun. Now, I have to tell you, I grew up in Northern California my whole life, so this was a little town we lived in really, and had nothing to do at 11 o'clock at night. We were surrounded by nothing but dense, dark, breathtaking woods. Woods that in the day were filled with hikers, happy families at the river, and disc golf players, whizzing little round plastic missiles by your head as you walk by. But of course, being love-struck teenagers, we decided to forget everything we had ever been taught in our lives about not going into the woods after dark, and took a midnight drive down to the river to a place called Pump 4. This place is a little ways off the beaten path, not too far from town. You take a paved road behind the tire shop, go about a mile, and pull up to a gravel road with a beaten up rusted yellow gate that is locked at midnight. As soon as I opened the truck door, I got a just downright eerie feeling. But then my hormones were like, nah girl, we're getting some tonight. So, of course, I ignored my gut feeling. Biggest mistake ever. Eric and I start to make our way down the gravel road that goes down into the gravel parking lot with a disc golf course and day picnic area that has little gazebos with fire pits for barbecuing. Halfway down the road, we were immediately stopped in our tracks. All of a sudden, we heard dogs in the distance going crazy for seemingly no reason. All we had was the dim moonlight and our cell phone flashlight to guide us. We were freaked the hell out. We almost turned back. We should have turned back. He and I make it to our destination, a little run-down wooden gazebo. Sitting on the peeling wood bench, we talked for a little while, making out between stopping to listen to our surroundings. Then it happened. I pushed him off and covered his mouth so he wouldn't make a noise. I whispered in his ear shakily, "There's something out there." He smiled and whispered back, "Ah, you getting scared?" jokingly. But this was not a joke, because what I saw defied all logic. First, it was just a shadow run by, darker than the night itself, about waist-high, four-legged, bushy-tailed shadow. At first I thought, oh, one of the dogs from earlier was coming by to say hi. The thing that crushed that theory was the fact that the dog-like shadow did not make any sound walking across the vast sea of brittle fall leaves all over the place. Then, after I alerted Eric, we saw another one go by the semi-enclosed gazebo the opposite direction. And that's when we saw it. Well, its eyes at least. They were glowing deep ruby red, illuminating through the sheer darkness of the woods surrounding it. At this point, I counted at least 4 of these creatures, and now they were circling us, but only catching glimpses at a time. After being frozen in time for a second, we were immediately hit with a rush of adrenaline. Eric picked me up and threw me over the bench and said, "Run, and do not look back." His words were stern but shaky, so I ran as fast as humanly possible up the dirt road that was almost straight up a hill, which on a normal day, my fat ass could never do in any other situation. But halfway up, I tripped. Yes, tripped cliché tripped, and decided to take a glance to see where the hell Eric was. And a little ways down the road, there it was, the 2 glowing red eyes in the middle of the road, right where I had been seconds ago. I got up and made it the short ways to the truck, where Eric already was. I flew into the passenger side, and we took off without shutting my door all the way. He took me straight back to my house, and I didn't sleep that night. My house was directly across the river from Pump 4. To this day, Eric and I are still good friends, and we've only told a couple of people, and the ones that we told are shaken because of the passion and fear that emanates from us when we speak about it. It made me a believer of all things crazy and unexplained. I used to work a factory job at Sandridge Foods in Ohio. My shift started at 4 a.m. and my commute was 45 minutes long. I took back roads after one too many near-death experiences on the highway. One leg of my drive went through an open field for about a mile, between a suburb and less than fancy houses. Just before the field, there is a 4-way stop which was illuminated by a single light post. One morning, I am at said stop when I notice a pair of eyes just ahead of me at the side of the road. I assumed it was a deer. I usually saw several forest puppies on my drive in, and I decided to wait for this one to pass. Better to be patient than to have a spooked deer total your car. So I'm looking at the eyes, which reflected via the streetlight, and I notice that they are looking back at me. Not just at my car, but at me. This struck me as a bit odd as we studied one another. I felt an intelligence in those eyes, as if it understood exactly what I was, and knew better than to get hit by my car. It was a bit unnerving, but then I guess the thing made up its mind that it didn't want to wait any longer, and it stood up. I myself are 6'2", and this thing easily dwarfed me. It rose up from beside the road and loped across the street. It was outside the cone of light from the streetlight, but I still got a hazy impression of its shape. The thing had massive forearms that reached out with long fingers when it walked. It was shaggy, and I got the impression of a long snout or muzzle. The way the thing walked was ape-like, but with the outstretched front limbs. The closest thing I can compare it to is the way that werewolves run in Skyrim. I couldn't breathe or think for a second. Then I snapped out of my fear and turned on my high beams, but the creature was long gone. I tore down the street and pushed my engine as fast as it could go. I worked that job for 2 more months, but I never saw the thing again. Still don't know what to make of it. I was working the overnight shift from Friday night into Saturday morning at a gas station. At about 6 AM, a semi pulls into the fuel aisle. The driver gets out and almost runs into the store, clearly shaken. His face is completely white and he is obviously upset. My first thought was, the poor man had hit someone on the road. We get a lot of drunks walking across a 4-lane highway in front of the store. So I ask what's wrong. He looks at me for a second and is like, I'm not crazy. Now I'm thinking, great, I'm here all alone and this guy is losing it. I say, of course not. I just saw something huge on the side of the road. Like a deer or bear? We had a bear get in the dumpster last week. No, bigger than a bear, on its back legs. Maybe a big person? It picked up a dead buck on the side of the road and carried it over its shoulder into the woods. I can only stare at him. My brain cannot deal with this information this late in a shift. This is in East Kentucky, and that isn't even the weirdest person to come into the store. A local comes up to the counter to get his usual, and the guy tells him the story. The local says, well, that's Bigfoot that lives near the country line. The truck driver and I are both looking at this guy like he has 2 heads. He has to be joking. This trucker pays for his fuel at record speed and leaves never to be seen again. The local still insists it's Bigfoot. I just don't go into the woods because I don't know. This happened in West Sussex in the UK. So my fiancé and I went to my mate's dad's pub and had a drink and something to eat. We left and it wasn't dark yet, so we went to these woods like 5 minutes away. We got there and my fiancé froze, and she looked anxious and she went all white. I was fine. I said let's go for a quick walk before it gets dark. So we got out and started walking down the path. The path was literally a straight line with crossroads every so often. I was completely fine, but she was clearly anxious or paranoid about something and kept looking around and saying she doesn't like it here. I started to freak out, like why is she doing this? We carried on walking and she said, can we go back? I have a bad feeling. We need to go, like now. I was so confused and made me a little anxious that she wouldn't tell me what was wrong. After like 10 seconds of walking, I look to my right and I see a silhouette of an adult standing on the side of the path. No clothes, no facial features, and nothing to resemble a human. I wasn't seeing things. I saw it, and my heart sunk. You know that cold, heart-wrenching feeling you get. I went so pale and so cold. I couldn't stop shaking, it was messed up. Then we kept walking, and I was so paranoid I kept looking behind us. We were getting close to the car, and she was nearly in tears. I got to the car, and it suddenly went pitch black outside, like it was bright, and then next thing you know, it's dark. We drove out, and she said, I don't want to talk about it until I'm out of this area. So we drove out the area, and then I said to her, did you see something? And she said yeah, and still looked pale as hell. Then I said, I'll tell you what I saw first, so that you know I'm not BSing you. So I said what I saw, and she saw the exact same thing. but she saw it twice, and she described it exactly how it looked. It was kind of like Slender Man vibes. Honestly, it was the most messed up thing I had ever experienced in my life. But it gets worse. So then we got back to Crawley and parked up outside her house. I parked facing a wall, so the back end of my car had space for people to walk behind it. We were talking about it, and we kind of forgot about it. Then I randomly looked in my windscreen mirror and saw someone walk really slowly behind the car. So I said to her, "Oh, there's someone behind the..." But I couldn't finish my sentence as that person vanished. I was looking in my wing mirror to see the person walk past, but no one popped out the other side. I got out and looked, and there was no one around us. My heart sunk so much into my chest. Never ever felt this petrified in my life. Then she saw someone walking next to the car, so I said screw this and pulled out and left. Then we drove out of the car park, and as soon as we did, we saw this woman walk out of her house holding her chest and staring at the sky, screaming as loud as she could. This was the first time something's happened to me, and I have so many questions. This story took place when I was a kid, about 12 or 13, maybe a bit younger. My dad had been a pool man for many years. One of his oldest customers decided to purchase a ranch. I don't exactly remember where. He asked my dad if he could come and fix their pool, which was disastrously maintained, before he bought it. He gave my dad permission to bring us along and told us we were welcome to stay a few days to enjoy the ranch. We drove there, and I had been in charge of reading the MapQuest instructions, because I never seemed to be able to sleep during car trips. We drove back home a few days later after my dad was finally able to save the pool. The drive home was very long. For long stretches, the view was mostly desert, farms, and the occasional small suburban town. Unlike me, my mum and brothers knocked out almost immediately, so most of the trip it was just my dad and me talking or listening to music. I'm also a very avid reader, so I had a book on my lap besides the maps. I remember the ride had been quiet for a while because I had been reading. I had to stop because it was getting dark, and my dad only let me turn on the dome light to read the maps. No radio service, and the Game Boy's batteries had all died. All I had left to do was look outside. All of a sudden, I spotted a very tall shadow on a roof. I realized there was a man who seemed to be wearing a hat, bowler or top hat, dancing and jumping from roof to roof of this suburban lot, kind of like the scene in Singing in the Rain, which at that point I had not seen. It was super tall and lanky. That was one of the reasons I registered it as abnormal. The best way to describe it, that it was like a solid shadow. It took a second to realize that it wasn't a normal thing to see. The houses were separated in a way where a normal person couldn't have jumped roof to roof. What scared me the most is how at the last house before the field, he seemed to turn around and sense me. He bowed and tipped his hat. Even though I couldn't see it, I could sense it smiling. All I felt was dread. I turned to face my dad to see if he saw him, but he had been paying attention to the road. When I turned back, I couldn't see the houses anymore. They were way behind us. I never saw a face or any details. He was just a silhouette on the roofs. I remember feeling afraid it would follow us, that it could if it wanted to. I never saw something like that on our many road trips ever again. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined it, but it felt so real. The memory is so vivid as well, which always comes back when I'm watching old musicals, because the dancing reminds me of the way he moved. I live by a forest, and I guess sometimes forest life comes into the town. So a while ago, about 5 years back, me being a kid, I loved staying up more than I should, played video games and watched random YouTube videos. But that evening, everything felt weird from the start. Scratches by my window frame and all that. Mind you, my mum was on the second floor in my parents' house. Anyways, I decided to listen to some music and build in Minecraft since I was waiting for my friends to come online like always. I got a couple of hours in and just felt uneasy, but wrote that off by the fact that it might just be in my head. Not 10 minutes pass and I hear a loud thud by my window. I slide the curtains back a bit since the desk is by the window, and I saw it. Crouched over my window, mid-air, facing the AC unit, a bit forward on the wall, and slowly but jittery, turning its head towards me with this weird-ass grin, basically till the ears. Its skin was not really wrinkly, eyes were dark, it was quite pale, mouth was quite big compared to myself, the head was quite big, and it didn't have any hair if my memory serves me right. I couldn't get the full body in my sight because it seemed like he was on the wall, peeping in my window since my room is on the second story. It was decently tall, I'd say about 2.5 meters, with quite white skin, hairless, white eyes I think. It looked quite anorexic to be honest. There was some resemblance or sign of sharp teeth. The area around the mouth was the same as the skin. I panicked, so closed my curtains, and all I heard was a loud scratch on the window, and it was gone. Let's just say I didn't sleep that night, or the night after. Ever since that encounter, I always have the curtains closed once it gets closer to evenings. Honestly, I don't know what it was, or what it wanted. I never have seen it again, but I also don't want to. I work in an apple orchard. During after-season cleanup, I ran late one night, nothing new, and met something I really hope to not meet again. I was transferring some wet and rotting hay bales into the manure spreader at night with only a cheap headlamp and the brake lights of the truck I was using to illuminate the area behind me. About halfway through, I start feeling like I'm being watched, but when I turn around to look, I see nothing. I go back to work and get a couple more bales broken up and thrown into the spreader before I get that weird feeling again and turn around. About half a football field away, I see the silhouette of a dude at the top of a hill behind me. He turns and walks away after I look at him. I say to myself, okay, that's weird, but it's probably just some kid coming to steal some apples or something, and get back to work. For the rest of the bales, I keep looking up and checking around, as I keep thinking I'm hearing running footsteps around me, but of course I see nothing when I look up. After I get the rest of the bales into the spreader and kick the residual hay out of the bed, I look up and damn near crap my pants. At the far reach of the truck's high beams, not all that far as it's a mid-90s Ford Ranger, I see this dark figure staring right at me. Immediately, this thing feels off, as it's just a little too tall to be human, and its limbs look a little too long. After staring at this thing for a minute, I slowly grab the radio and call for my boss, or really anyone. No answer. I call again just to be certain. I'm not getting reception. No answer. Then quietly get out of the bed and hop into the cab. The literal second my door shuts, this thing snaps around and shoots off away from my headlights. I summoned my newfound rally driving skills and shot towards the front of the farm where I could clock out and get home and away from this thing. I've never seen it again, and I sure as hell hope I don't.
This happened to me while I was in college 20 plus years ago, and I'll never forget it. It was one of the first times I ever remember seeing true fear and panic on someone's face. This part will only spatially make sense if you're familiar with Monterey, California. I lived in the seaside area, and my college girlfriend lived in Carmel Valley. Sometimes, when I would drive her home late at night, we would take a lightly used roadway called Laurel's Grade, which was long, dark, and full of winding turns. It also let us out near her house, so it was a minor time saver. We were driving home late one night, and we were chatting and laughing about something or another, as we usually did on the ride, when she looks out the window, stops mid-sentence, screams, and then looks forward and yells, "Go, go, go!" She is terrified. I floor it and ask her what's happening, and she won't talk. She is literally next to me, hyperventilating. I drove unsafely fast through the twists and turns of the road, and a few minutes later slowed down, assuming that whatever scared her was far in our rear view. By this point, she's calmed down a bit as well, and I ask her again what happened. Her first reply was, "Did you see it?" She then proceeds to tell me, as we were driving around a corner, she was looking at the window, and my headlights lit up a human-looking animal, standing along the side of the road, disjointly on all fours, with a human-looking face that looked like it was hissing. My first reaction was that it might actually be a hurt person, and maybe we should go back or call 911, but she was adamant that no, it was not a person, and there was no way we were going back. We got to her house a few minutes later, and out of extra precaution, called the local police and asked them to go check the area. We never had any follow-up from them. Fast forward 15 or so years, and I was telling a co-worker who was from that area about the incident. She got really spooked, and when I finished, she told me that Laurel's Grade was known for strange sightings, and this is a spot that UFO fanatics tend to go to. I'm not a UFO guy, but I thought it was interesting. Me and some of my buddies used to go to this place called Profile Rock in Freetown, Massachusetts, sometimes 2 or 3 in the morning. One night during the summer, I go to Profile Rock with 3 of my friends at 2:30 a.m. just to mess about and explore. Now, I didn't know this at the time, but Profile Rock and the area we were in is part of an area called the Bridgewater Triangle, which is a site of alleged paranormal activities, and also one of the most haunted areas in the state I live in. Continuing on, we climbed Profile Rock itself, stayed on top of it for maybe 3 to 4 hours, and we decided to leave. Now, as you're leaving Profile Rock, you have to go down this long path that's about 2 miles long to get back to where we parked our car. 2 of my friends are walking about 20 to 30 feet in front of me and my other friend. Now, I'll never know why I turned around. I didn't have a feeling like someone was watching us. I just simply turned around because besides the moonlight shining through the trees in certain areas, we only had cell phone flashlights to make our way around. I remember turning around and seeing someone running at us from about 150 feet away, full speed. What threw me off wasn't that they were running at us, it was how they were running. You know how a zombie walks in a horror movie, dragging one of its legs, almost limping? That's how this person was running at us. At first, I didn't say anything and possibly assumed it was one of my friends or someone that was already in there who got injured and needed assistance, until this someone made it to an area of the path where the moonlight reached through the trees and gave them some perspective. What I saw still chokes me up to this day. You ever see a child try to draw a person? How they make a stick figure most of the time? That's exactly how this someone looked. I caught maybe a 10-second glance as it was running under the moonlight-lit trees, but I saw no distinguishable facial features, no eyes, no mouth, no ears. Its arms and legs looked like that of an extremely malnourished person, only completely black, and it didn't look like skin or any type of clothing from what I could see. I almost couldn't even describe it, to be honest, and you could blatantly tell it wasn't a mask or one of those Halloween blacked out suits. I recall calling out to my friend in a panicked voice who was walking with me, who was now maybe 10 feet ahead of myself. I shined my cell phone light on him and he was looking where I was looking, and I could tell right away from his facial expression that I wasn't seeing things. It was now maybe 40 feet away from us, if that, almost the same distance as our friends in front of us, and me and my friend just took flight and started running. My two friends in front shot around and asked us what was wrong, and I replied, "Just run," and all of us jetted for our car. I remember taking a glance back when we were running, and there was nothing there, even though whatever was chasing us would certainly be on our tails by now. We all hopped into the car, and my friend who was walking with me yells, "Dude, tell me you seen that. What the hell was that?" I told him I saw the same thing. I asked him to describe to all of us what he saw, and he described literally the same thing I witnessed. By now, my other two friends are thinking we were joking around or messing with them, until my friend who was walking with me swore on his father, who passed away not even a month ago, that he's telling the truth. I was kind of frustrated, to be honest, because I couldn't believe my other two friends didn't see it as they turned around to question why we were running, but it doesn't matter now. My only regret is not stopping and seeing what would happen. Then again, this was 9 years ago, and I'm saying this with an older mentality. I've only really ever gone super deep into the forest a few times. I stopped going real deep myself when I found maybe 20 to 30 animal skulls scattered in a clearing, along with statues of Mary and Jesus with their heads smashed in. Probably some cult stuff which I want no part of. We actually went back there with a few more people the day after and witnessed nothing, of course. I'll never know what it was, or who it was, or what it wanted. But I know one thing, there's no way in hell two people both imagined some stick figure spectre in the woods. My name is Eli, and I'm 22 years old now, and I have always loved being outdoors and in the woods. I remember about 9 years ago, when I was around 12 or 13, my family and I moved to Minnesota to help out my grandparents. They were getting up there in age and couldn't run the farm like they used to, and just for a change of scenery. A year or so after the move, my two brothers and I got into the habit of running around the edge of the woods, along the back sides of the property, and exploring where we probably shouldn't. With that, after school one day, my brothers and I got our stuff and made a 400 or 500 yard walk to the forest behind the house.
my brothers decided to take off and run ahead, about another 300 yards ahead of me, play tackling and just be rambunctious teens, while I noticed a bundle of flowers that my grandmother would have loved. As I was looking at the flowers, I heard a bit of rustling in the woods, about 15 to 20 feet to my right. I didn't think too much about it, 'cause, it's the woods. So I shook my head and went to grab the bunch of flowers to give to my grandmother. No sooner had I reached my hand out to grab them, I heard, in my brother's voice, someone call me by name for help. It sounded like my little brother, except it was off a little bit, like it was being played by a recording. I immediately froze, because as I looked up, I noticed my two brothers were a ways ahead of me, playing in the snow. I remember calling for them to hurry up and come with me to the house, and as I turned to run up to the house, I noticed a lone coyote moving in between some old beat-up trucks that my grandfather had parked in a pasture on the edge of the woods. But this coyote was considerably larger than any one I've seen up to this point. And what struck me as odd was that this coyote looked like it got hit by a car, and I swear when it moved around the trucks, it looked like it had its paws on the side of the truck, like it was trying to look over the truck at me. I couldn't help myself and yelled, "Hey," to it, and we sat down for about a minute or less, just staring at each other. Before I could turn and start back walking to my house, I watched this thing lean around the truck and say in my brother's voice again, "Hey." When this happened, I yelled for my brothers and booked it to the porch of the house. As my brothers caught up to me, they noticed how pale I was and asked what was wrong. So I told them I'd seen a mountain lion, scared of being ridiculed for seeing something so ridiculously frightening. Later that night, I was looking around the internet and found some other encounters by people all over the United States having similar stories, and came across an article about the skinwalkers, which was both terrifying and interesting. This is the only encounter I've had with such entities. I just wanted to get my story out there as a bit of a warning that there are things out there that don't really make sense to the human mind. As I said, I'm a pretty avid outdoorsman, despite the events that have plagued me in the past. The events in this encounter happened not too far inside the Ocala National Forest in central Florida. So the day started with a phone call from my brother, who was asking to take a hike in the national forest outside of our town, and then to spend the night out there in hopes of doing a little fishing and roasting some marshmallows over the fire. It was me, my brother, and his girlfriend, who I see as my loving little sister, so it was going to be a chill night. We left town and headed to the woods pretty early that day, around 3 in the afternoon. We had gotten to our spot in the woods after 2 hours of riding around, trying to find the perfect spot to set a tent. My brother, sister, and I decided to start the day with some fishing, so we grabbed our rods and a tackle box and headed for a little stream about a quarter mile from our camping spot. As we came close to the stream, we noticed an awful smell, like rotten meat. When we came up to the river, we found the source of the smell, an abundance of dead fish all around the edge of the stream, and saw that the water had a nasty rust-colored tint to it. When we were done gagging at the sight and smell of what was in front of us, a huge sense of dread washed over, with an uncomfortable feeling of being watched. My sister noticed and asked what was wrong, so I played it off with a joke and suggested we go make the fire and set up the tent. So I shrugged it off, not wanting to frighten her. After another 30-minute hike from the stream back to the campground, my brother and sister started collecting wood for the fire, while I started to set up the tent. I set the tent up around the same time that they came back with enough wood to have a fire last a long while. So we got the fire lit, and I admit it was a damn good fire, and we decided to start roasting some marshmallows. Before I could eat any, I had to take a leak, so I told them I was going to go step into the woods for a second to pee. I walked about 30 feet into the woods and started to relieve myself when I heard my sister say, "Hello?" Finding this extremely odd, I looked around. I didn't see anyone or anything, so I went back to my business. As I was zipping up my zipper, I heard her say again, "Hey." Thinking they were pranking me, I rushed back to the campground to find them still roasting marshmallows over the fire. Kind of freaked out, I asked them if they were messing with me, to which they frowned and explained that they've been in the same spot since I went into the woods. Now terrified, they saw how ghost white I had turned and asked me if everything is alright. So I told them what I had heard, and they suggested we go into the tent and go to bed early. So that's what we did. After already taking a while to fall asleep, I woke up in the middle of the night to underbush crunching right outside our tent, and the horrible smell from earlier was back, worse than before. For fear of scaring the hell out of my brother and sister, I decided not to wake them up. As I sat there, shaking and sweating, I noticed the sound of twigs snapping had stopped, and I began to hear what I swear was loud, raspy, and heavy breathing, like something was trying to sniff out our tent. I quietly tried to lay back down and cover my ears so I couldn't hear the breathing anymore, and eventually I fell back asleep. The next morning we woke up late, so we decided to start packing up our belongings and head home. When we got out of the tent, the first thing we noticed was that our cooler was torn up and thrown upside down against a tree, with everything that was in there strewn throughout the campsite. Another thing I noticed when I was rolling the tent up was a ton of footprints, weird footprints that almost looked like normal, except for obvious claw marks above each toe. Once I spotted these, I hurried up putting the tent in my truck and got my brother, sister, and myself out of there as quickly and safely as I could. As of yet, I haven't been back camping in any kind of woods, and I can't imagine coming across another one of these things.